Ottawa has passed billions upon billions of dollars to help Canadians during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, south of the border, meanwhile, in the United States, Congress there passed bills of $3 trillion to combat the virus and its effects. Now, the White House has begun informal talks with Republicans and Democrats to talk about even more legislation. To talk about it more is American journalist Lisa Daftari joining me from Los Angeles. Lisa, how much more are we talking about? What will the funding go towards specifically?
Well, right now, what's prompted this latest discussion over yet another aid package is the unemployment numbers. How, if you recall, before this entire crazy, chaotic coronavirus pandemic began, the United States, under the leadership of Donald Trump, was touting unbelievable, very, very low unemployment numbers that were really unprecedented in the past and have been, were touted by the Trump administration as being something that they had worked very hard on. Now those numbers are in somewhere in the mid 30 million or more and climbing. The claims are more and more each day, as we know that the economic devastation of this pandemic has been incredibly difficult for every country to handle. And when you look at the United States, such a large economy and such a prolific economy, suffering the way that it does, you look at other countries, and we know all around the world, so many people are suffering. And you and I always talk about there's two sides of this pandemic. There is the physical and the health damage, and there is the economic and the psychological damage that this has done. So now Democrats and Republicans are going to go at it again. We hope that they can leave partisanship aside to work on something that will get even more money to the American people. But as my husband said something very interesting last night. He said, right now it's like the honeymoon phase for a lot of Americans. They've either received a check or they're living off of some sort of savings. But this is going to hit much harder as the weeks go on, more and more and more, and people realize whether there's no income or they have to either take a pay cut or cut their hours or have some sort of consequence to all of this. Their savings dry out, all of that. So we hope that this aid package can serve even more Americans than it has in the past.
Mother's Day has come and gone, and this was your first Mother's Day as a mom, right?
Correct.
Congratulations on that. Now, your president, Donald Trump, apparently lashed out at your former president, Barack Obama, in the Mother's Day tweet storm. And it had something to do with former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn?
Yes, I recall yesterday just sitting there and having, my phone just go off and off and off because I have alerts when Donald Trump starts tweeting, and talk about a tweet storm. And the most kind of the tweet that stood out the most was the hashtag Obamagate that kind of took over Twitter all of last night into today, and I'm sure this entire week. Donald Trump has uncovered certain things that have come up about the Flynn investigation that lead to other accusations based on this entire craziness that was built to bring down Donald Trump, his cabinet, people working for him. And now it's believed that this was allegedly the work of former President Barack Obama before he left office. He started putting the pieces into place to really sabotage the Trump administration and the individuals like Flynn and others, that they would be framed, quote unquote. And that is what we're hearing from Donald Trump, from Flynn's attorney. And it all comes back to wanting to impeach the president, wanting to draw lines between the president and Russia, and to bring in all of these, again, cabinet members from the Trump administration. So President Obama is in a lot of hot water, a lot of attention on him right now.
U.S. Vice President Mike Pence, press secretary, has tested positive for COVID-19, Lisa. Now, a spokesperson for the VP says Pence himself is not in quarantine or self-isolating.
Who knows what this is going to be? If you remember, one of the images that came out from the mainstream media that is very quick to again criticize, obviously, the president and the vice president was Michael Pence going and visiting somewhere and not wearing a mask at the time. And then, fast forward many weeks later, you have someone in his cabinet was diagnosed as being COVID positive. It's interesting because when you know people that work for the president or for the vice president, you automatically assume. And I got texts from two people who I know saying it's not me, don't worry. It actually ends up being a female who works for him, and whether or not Vice President Pence is in quarantine or not, obviously this hits very close to him and those around him. The White House is taking extra precautions. When we watch these briefings, we think, well, they're standing a bit too close to one another, or should they all be in that closed room for that briefing? Or, they're all going home to families as well. So we hope that they all stay safe and take the necessary precautions.
The leaders in your country are trying to balance optimism with the threat of a second wave of the coronavirus. A recent report says COVID-19 has claimed more than 26,000 lives in nursing homes and long-term care facilities in the United States.
Yes, and that's a segment of the population that has been very hardly hit, and that was a segment of the population and a place where the virus was spread before anyone could do anything. Obviously, we know that this virus hits the 65 and above, particularly those with pre-existing conditions, particularly those with lung and heart issues, etc. So obviously, nursing homes were very hard hit. Also, we talk about a second wave. Every country right now is concerned about a second wave, meaning we know what we have to do. We know that we're flattening the curve. We know that every country is trying their best to bring their numbers down so that they could reopen. People want to get back to work. They want to get the economy bustling once again. But with that comes that risk of having people gather again and having people be diagnosed again, having this second wave that has been experienced by some countries. And the United States is particularly concerned that in major cities like New York, like Los Angeles, San Francisco, areas that have been hard hit, that once they reopen the economy, that we will have a second wave once again.
Some Persian Gulf states have reached out to Israel for help in battling the COVID-19 pandemic. Will Israel lend a helping hand to Bahrain or maybe the United Arab Emirates?
Well, Israel is always, they don't get enough credit for this, actually, has always been there to help their neighbors. I was on the Syrian border a few years ago covering stories about how the Syrian refugees would be flown in or even by car taken into Israeli hospitals and treated at no cost, no questions asked. They literally may have been, soldiers who were shooting at Israel, and yet they would be treated by Israel. They treated children, they treated parents, and they would triage them just the same as Israelis, meaning their lives would be equivalent to that of Israeli lives. The same thing goes for technology, water irrigation, and now for COVID help. So Israel has been one of the countries that have had a very quick and successful track record of getting back up, meaning they had a lot of cases to begin with. It spread very quickly. They started quarantining, and this was, one of those very harsh and stringent quarantine examples where, people who flew into the country, whether they lived there or they were visiting, had to be quarantined for 14 days. They were able to flatten the curve very quickly and get back up. So now it's no surprise that Bahrain, the UAE, Kuwait, countries that are, have lukewarm relations with Israel at best are now asking for help. And, these are stories that should be told, that this small country the size of New Jersey there in the Middle East with so many enemies in the region is lending out a hand and a significant source of assistance to them.
Sadly, the number of coronavirus cases is once again on the rise in Germany. That was just days after the country began easing additional lockdown measures.
Yes, unfortunately, Germany was one of those test cases where they opened up the economy and slowly got back up with an eye on whether or not those numbers would go back up and have a second wave. And sure enough, they did. Those numbers are up, and now they have to kind of take it back down a notch. Again, we're going to see this with many countries. We're going to see them try to get back up because that's what everyone is trying to do, and then see those cases rise. And the only thing that a lot of lawmakers alongside medical professions are saying is that herd immunity is also a thing, meaning once we ride out this second wave, we'll see a true flattening of the curve for a longer period of time. Meaning, as people gather, there is such a thing as herd immunity. Your immunity actually increases by being around people who have the antibodies, who had coronavirus, et cetera. And hopefully, again, we won't see this as much, but there will be second waves in a lot of the countries that are reopening, unfortunately.
Meanwhile, in Spain, where some of my German relatives like to go holiday, a lot of Europeans love Spain. Now, some Spaniards there want to see the lockdown eased as daily deaths are falling once again in Spain.
Yeah, Spain had a very aggressive go at this as well. Very similar to Italy in Europe. Those two countries were not able to, for a very long time, flatten the curve. They weren't able to get the numbers down. And if they did, it wasn't significant enough. So what we heard from Fauci and many of the other experts in all of this is that the graph going upward will be entirely steep and will rise very quickly. Going down will be very gradual. So even if they are flattening the curve, it's very, very slow, and the number of fatalities daily is still very high. That is partly due to the number of cases that were diagnosed very quickly, and also because of their medical facilities that are just not able to handle the number of cases that they have. So Spain, again, one of those economies when you're watching to see once they open up, how bad will it be? Do they have to stagger the opening? And really take precautions that are very nuanced so that it fits each case, according to what they need.
Iran, a country which was hit very hard by the coronavirus, Lisa, has locked down a large portion of the southwestern region of the country after a recent spike in cases there.
Right, and then you hear about Iran closing down a certain part of the country because of the spikes in cases in that area. At the same time, the mullahs announced that the mosques would be opened up this week. That's exactly where this starts. The gathering of people in a place like a mosque where there's very, very little ventilation. People are jam-packed, shoes off, breathing on top of each other, and that's exactly how it starts right back up again. And again, this government, the regime in Iran, is masterful at spreading this disease among the lower socioeconomic brackets. They they have done this in the past. They show those numbers, and then they say to the world, "This is why we need our sanctions removed." And this is exactly part of the plan. So they'll put out a headline that part of the country was closed down because of the spike. They're doing something. They're proactive. Look at us. We're really taking care of this and showing leadership. But at the same time, opening the mosques, very irresponsible when they have numbers like these.
And Lisa, some good news. Disneyland has finally reopened, just not the one in Anaheim, but the one in Shanghai is opening.
Right, and gives people hope that the one in Anaheim, when the time is right, will open as well. The only reason I say that is not only because of those kids who are waiting to get back there and people who have season passes. I'm not there yet. My baby is very young, but I'm sure I will be very soon. But it's a lot of jobs lost. A lot of families are suffering. People who live in that area, as you know, how Southern California is not cheap. So people who live there and sustain that lifestyle and are out of work are truly suffering. But we are happy that the one in Shanghai is opening up. We're happy about all openings across the globe, wherever places are opening and they're able to. Without having this second wave or inviting the risk of a second wave, we're incredibly happy, and we're very happy for the people of Shanghai, the children of Shanghai who can go enjoy and be happy, and I hope that they post their pictures for others to see and enjoy as well.
Meanwhile, down under, kids in Australia are slowly returning to school as that country seems to be flattening the curve of the coronavirus.
Yes, I don't know how it is in Canada, but in places where schools are opening, well, first of all, it's a very unusual time for schools to be reopening. We're almost at the end of the school year, so a lot of school districts, including in Los Angeles, have decided to just go into summer break. They continue their classes via Zoom or online platforms. But when you have in Australia or other places in the world where you don't have the same summer winter schedule, they are reopening, and this is good news. This is probably better news for the parents of those kids than anyone else. But yes, we are seeing a lot of staggered scheduling where some kids go to school in the morning, some in the afternoon. They're trying to limit the number of children who are interacting with one another. And as kids on a regular given in a non-COVID world are the ones who bring home germs. They're the ones who bring home colds and coughs, and that's why I think people are very, very, very hesitant to open schools. And when they do, they must be very careful as how we do it.
The term murder hornet is back in the news again. Lisa, experts are saying panic over the murder hornet will lead to damage to essential bee populations. Now, the deadly insects were spotted last weekend in Washington state, and they've apparently made their way up to Canada here in British Columbia.
I don't know if you've seen one of these, but did we need something else to be afraid of? I mean, people, the only thing people are enjoying these days are their walks, the ability to just go outside and get some fresh air. And now we have to worry about these killer hornets. These are coming from Japan. They kill about 50 people a year, which is a very low number. But I mean, if you know someone who's killed by a hornet, I think it's pretty devastating. And I think it's devastating to know that this little insect could take potentially a human life. Now, in the interim, it's also taking a lot of other insect lives, including the bees, who are already in risk of becoming extinct. That's been a very popular story in the news for the last 6 to 12 months about bees being on the verge of extinction. There are a lot of people who have gone or shown interest in saving the bee population, and now you have these hornets that serve a very big risk to taking out a lot of insects, including these bees.
COVID-19 murder hornets. I wonder what's next. They say it comes in threes, right?
Oh gosh, well, Kobe was #1, right? So I think we're done for 2020.
Our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, thanks for joining me from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks for watching.